Hey everyone, and welcome! Let me know if everyone can hear me and see me and all the things. Hopefully today I got all the ducks in a row. Welcome, I'm Susan Smith. You're in my studio, Stitched by Susan. So often on this channel I am doing long arming projects, but today I'm working on a sewing project. And I was here just a few nights ago as well, doing the same thing, working on a new Christmas quilt. It's called Crimson Christmas by Krista Moser of The Quilted Life. It is a sweetheart. Can you see those gorgeous poinsettias? It's just kind of a contemporary interpretation. And you guys, I set up a temporary design wall. I don't really have one in my studio because it's chock full of recording stuff. And I don't have very many clear wall spaces to do that. So I just hung a chunk of batting up over top of my quilt that is usually there. And I'm, blocking out my stuff on there. It's a bit of a complex layout. Yeah, let me show you a picture. Yeah, of the exploded quilt, right? And so I've got to have that place to lay it out. It's just not something you can piece in chunks and blocks without sort of seeing the whole thing. So let me just look at the comments for a minute and make sure that all is going well. Whew! Laura says all good for sound and video. Marge says all will go well. Marge has faith in me. Okay, so here's the scoop. I'm going to work for a few minutes on laying out the rest of the units that I've got pieced because I've done as many units as I can. And then I'm just going to start putting them together piece by piece. I'm going to work in as, straightforward, logical a fashion as I can. On the other hand, I do have dark and light fabrics, and so I did change out. You can see I've got gray on my machine right now. That's what I'm doing the red and the deeper green and the dark charcoal with. And then I've got a kind of sand color that I'm doing on the white, cream, gray area. So I'll kind of be going back and forth for the thread changes too. So I'll try and make that efficient. So for whatever it's worth, this is not a lesson. I'm not teaching anything. Often when I do these sessions, I learn from you guys as much as I know myself. It's just an opportunity for us to chat and sew alongside each other for a little bit. I brought my fresh cup of coffee with me and I'm all set to start sewing. Okay, a few brass tacks. I'm working at my stand-up sewing table, which I love. And this is, I'll show you what it looks like when it goes up and down. Isn't that cool? This is by Horn of America, and I love, love, love it. Now, the table came to me courtesy of Stitchhouse in Richardson, Texas, and we do some collaboration together, and they provided me with this lovely table, and I adore it. In the past, I've not had a stand-up table, but I love the ability to move around and move to my iron and my board, and I don't love just sitting. So this suits me to a T. So I do most of my sewing standing like this, and I just love it. And I have a BERNINA 770 QE. That's what I'm sewing on. It's not a machine that I've had for a long period of time. So those of you who are here and know the BERNINAs so well, this is where I learned from you guys because I'm just not as well acquainted with it. I have typically sewn on a Singer 301 was my old favorite. So, we all have our favorite standbys. Let's see what's chiming in on the computer, and I sort of have to turn my side to you when I go to look. All good in sound and video. Lynn, hi from New Zealand. Awesome. Anne in blustery southeastern Washington. So I'm curious, are you getting bad weather over there? I was out today briefly to the grocery store and I passed a vehicle that had snow, as they do. It was a truck. So on the top of the cab of the truck and the hood, we have not seen any snow flurries. We are actually having a lovely day here today. So, okay, chime in on what you're working on. Let's just get the conversation started. If you've got a similar time of day to me, I'm at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. What you planning for dinner, that sort of stuff. And I'm going to start putting my pieces on the wall. So I shall just refer to my handy chart. And by the way, I did put a link in the description to Krista's website and specifically this pattern. Know that she has already published a correction page for the cutting chart. And so if you make sure you look for that, she may have already inserted it into the digital patterns, good chance she did. But anyway, you want to watch for that. It was nothing too critical, but I had already found out there wasn't quite enough pieces of one. For example, I had enough fabric and everything, but it just said cut so many and I should have cut a few more kind of thing. So nothing critical, but helpful. Okay, here we go, map in hand. Okay. So there's all these little partial units, right, that fill in the side and the bottom. So I'm just going to read my trusty little map here and try to get them into place. Nope, that's not right. No, it's this side right here. this will be the outer edge of the quilt right here. There's that one, and then a diamond. Oh shoot, this is right next to a diamond that's the same. I might have to think about recutting that. One of the things that I did, which I talked about last Friday, is that Krista gives fabric instructions too for how many light reds, how many medium reds, how many dark reds, etc. I went fairly scrappy with mine, especially the dark reds. So then her layout suggestions I veered away from because I was mixing and matching my pieces. So some of mine I've had to recut just because I didn't like the way they looked together. And that's just sometimes what happens when you're working with scrappy. I was okay with that. I accepted it. But meantime, I might have to make an adjustment or two. That does not seem right. Let me see. Gotta move my chair. This one goes like this. I should have another one. Should have a polka dot one. That's what I'm missing, isn't it? I should have a polka dot one because I go marble, polka dot, etc. So I need a polka dot one. And therefore, this would work if I did it that way, right? But now I've got two here that are alike, and I don't love that. But that works. Nope, that's not what goes in there. This goes next. And here's another example. I've already pinned a piece up here. My goal was to have these little ones alternate around that middle too. And as you can see, they're not alternating well. I may end up switching those. I'll make a final decision before I sew everything together. There we go. Now those worked well. And then this goes in, and that's that bottom corner. I'll move the chair a bit more so you can see. That's good, except I don't love that center, so I'm definitely going to work on that. And something is still missing. There's another triangle in there. This goes down. Because I was doing scrappy stuff on this, I wasn't able to follow the pattern quite as systematically as I'd like. So I feel like I'm missing one of these units, and it's probably the one I've got right here because I want to swap out that center. It is. So I have enough pieces, but I do not like the way this center goes. I want these to alternate for sure. So I'll have to see how I can make that happen. If those two switched, would that be alternating? I think so, but I'll think on that before I do it. Okay, back to the green. Let's see. On the top, we have I should have made the whole thing a bit lower. That's that one. This one. Hopefully it'll stick. If I push hard enough, it'll stick, right? This one goes down here. Okay. Here. Got a bit of a wrinkle in my batting here. This one goes here. No, that's not right. Got something wonky here. This is a diamond. This should have Oh look, here comes Kitty to help. He's so helpful when I'm doing things like this. So helpful. So I need a little triangle, and I knew that. This is right, it's just not scooched together quite right. There we go. Where does this little geezer go, or does it? Swap this out so I don't get two prints that are the same side by side. I hope you guys can see reasonably well. It's the best I can do. Like that. No, this side. And then, yeah, I need another white partial and a triangle, and I don't seem to have that. And this goes down here. I got that triangle. I think that's all the bits except these three little white ones. So I'm going to mess around with that red for a bit. The question is, am I going to mess around with that now or when I'm not on camera? Let's see what everyone has to say. Let's see what you guys are working on. Anne says rain and wind because I was asking about her weather. Great day for quilting. I fully agree. Goat Quilter, oh my, it's looking great. I watched this weekend as I quilted on my long arm. Just had homemade burritos for dinner. Ooh, yum, that sounds good. We're making like an Asian sesame noodle thingy here. Laura is working on a log cabin variation for my granddaughter's grad. It's getting very large and a struggle to wrangle. LOL. Erin, it's looking so gorgeous. Angie, I'm looking forward to doing this quilt too. When I do, I think I might add some yellow bits in the centers to mimic what a real poinsettia looks like. That is a super idea. You know, if I had any tips to add, like Krista does give really good instructions, but if you make any variations to it and have to change the steps at all, it's really complex thinking through it because it's not in regular blocks, really. So if I was doing it again, I would spend more time laying out exactly where I wanted things, like the whole, you piece a big triangle at some point in it, like this one. And I think I would lay out that much of it and be sure I was happy with the look, and maybe even two of them so I could see how they're meeting up. So funny story over the weekend. I had a mistake in this central area, and this was my own fault entirely, but these diamonds right here, I had inverted. So the two strips were in the middle instead of all these little bits. And I didn't like the look of that at all. Like this looks so cool because you have the smallest pieces in the center and then a bit larger and then larger still. And it lost that effect, even though the fabrics blended fine. So I actually did undo all these seams, took those diamonds out, flipped them around. And it was totally worth it to me. I would do that again in a heartbeat. So if you're messing with the yellow, then I would really lay that out so you know where they're going to end up in those repeats. That's all I have to say about that. So look, it's like an IKEA kit. I have 3 parts left over and I'm 3 parts short, but they're not the same thing. Who knows? Who knows? Anyway, I say let's start sewing it together. Krista kind of builds it in long strips, so I'm going to work that way too, and I'll just go down as far as my dark thread works, and I'll leave the lighter portions for later. I think this is going to be a little bit of a process, and I might wait to fix those red bits until I'm off air, because I've really got to think that through. But I promise I'll let you see the finished product. So let's see again if there's any more comments, and then I'll start sewing a little bit. Diana, I just finished a charity quilt on my long arm, resting now. That's work well done. Barbara, good evening, looking gorgeous. Janice, looking beautiful. Angie, I lay things out on the floor and my dog likes to help me rearrange blocks if she doesn't like how I did it. Isn't that the truth? Laura loves to watch my brain at work. I'm glad you do, Laura. Sometimes I feel a wee bit scattered, but honestly, this is kind of how I work. I try it and sometimes it doesn't work the first time and then I just do it again. Kathy, hello from Indiana. Love the rich colors. Rianne sewing some binding on fall placemats. And Jeannie cutting fabrics to get ready for my first quilt retreat. Ooh, that is exciting. Awesome. Barbara, I'm working on a quilt for someone in Washington State. My fave batting is warm and natural. Is that the best for warmth and weight? You know, it's a fine one for warmth and weight, Barbara. I mean, Washington State has quite a variation of temperatures too. I'm on the eastern side, so we're quite arid and dry and quite hot in the summer. Not Arizona hot, but fairly hot. Where, you know, on the coast, they get much more temperate temperatures. So summers don't get as hot, winters don't get as cold, obviously, either. Judy Hebert, I hope you quilt this on a live. I hope to, Judy, but of course there's only so many weeks left before Christmas, so we'll see how it goes. Okay, I'm going to start stitching things together. I've got my Laura Star going. There's my sauna right there. It's hot and ready. Okay, let's start at the top. My temporary design wall actually works quite well. I pinned it to the quilt that's behind it, and in places I also tacked it to the drywall, and it's working like a charm. Over the weekend I oiled my machine as well, cleaned and oiled it. I had sewn quite a few bobbins worth, and by quite a few I mean probably 6 or 8 bobbins worth of sewing, and so I thought it was time. So I gave it a good brushing and cleaning, and then took the time to oil it a touch. I had pressed this one seam closed because it's kind of a partial one against the charcoal, but I don't like that, so I'm opening it with my fingertips and I'm going to press it open. I am generally a press to the side quilter, but more of my quilts tend to be made with blocks, and so then I like the nesting quality of seam allowances pressed to the side. But Krista generally presses her seams open in her patterns, just because you're working with so many angled seams, and it really does make it beautifully flat. So there's pros and cons for both ways. There really is. Let's go press that little partial seam open properly. And this is what I mean by a partial. See how the green and the black, there's not a full join here because that's going to get trimmed off. Somewhere that's getting trimmed off. Anyway, but I still want it open. It just lays better for the purposes of this quilt. It does indeed make me happy when the seam allowances look like that. Okay, this goes this way, right? And then down here. I am taking the time to pin here. For one thing, it's a really long seam, and for another, some of these are areas where on the parts that I undid and redid, and so inevitably that does end up stretching your fabric a little bit. So I just want to be sure that I get it all in as flat as I possibly can so I don't end up with distortion. My trusty seam ripper that I use like a stencil. stencil's not the word I want, stylus, that's the word I wanted. I do love it when a project starts to come together like this. While I'm quilting, I should mention, coming up in just a couple of weeks, I'm going to be at Stitchhouse in Richardson, Texas, teaching some classes at the Longarm. So if you are a Longarm quilter and in that area and would be interested, check out their website. They've got a great class schedule there. It is, I believe it's the 14th and 15th. It's a Thursday and Friday anyway. And one of them is going to be like my regular live and unscripted episode. I'm just literally going to be filming and streaming it from their store. So you get to be in on a live episode. Mr. Producer will be there with me too. I cannot do those without him. So yes, indeed, he will be. Look at that. Isn't that pretty? And Richardson, by the way, is just outside of Dallas. So that gives you a ballpark idea where I'm at. We were talking ever so briefly the first night I was doing this live about, you know, to starch or not to starch, or to use just a pressing aid, even if not really a starch. And some people just love it. I certainly don't dislike pressing aids, but I seldom feel like taking the time to do it. And my Laura Star is, when I steam, it adds almost that crisp hand of a light starch. So I'm happy with how this is coming together, even with all the bias seams that are in it, all the angled seams. It's coming together quite nicely. Donna's asking about my iron. I'll show you. It's by Laura Star. It's a crazy steaming iron, and it's got they call it a lift. So you can put the iron right on here and it can rest in there like for traveling. But this is a tank of where it steams the water. So there's a big tank of water. It steams in the tank. It steams again in the cord. And so you get this really fine steam. And it is crazy effective. Effective at getting wrinkles out and effective at pressing really flat seams. You notice that I don't press my seam, just the sewn seam before well, I'll show you when I get to this one. I used to always press my seam closed first and then open it because it sunk the threads into the fabric and made it so flat, and I don't have to do that anymore. Likewise, I don't ever use a clapper anymore either. This iron sort of covers all those bases. Let's see what else. Selena, good evening. Just finished a fall table runner. Awesome. Lena's working on practicing ribbon candy and loops. Angie's saying, I like open seams with triangles. Maybe that's what the difference is, Angie. Like when you've got the seam intersections that you get with angles, I like open seams too. I agree with that. Patricia's finishing a charity quilt, putting the binding on. Northern Sue is catching the real you. Yes. Louise is asking what kind of thread I'm using on my domestic Bernina. I have a whole bunch of thread that I purchased from Connecting Thread, so it's 100% cotton thread. It's their larger sized spool, and it's really economical. Like I don't know, it's maybe $3 or $3.50-ish for a spool, and it's a 40 weight thread. So it's not the finest thread out there, but it has served me well, and I have a bunch of it, so that's what I'll be using for the foreseeable future. This is what I meant when I said I used to always press like this first to get that seam flat and kind of set the thread in it, sink the thread into the fabric. I don't do that anymore with my Laura Star iron. It doesn't seem to need it. I get beautifully flat seams and the expected size and result that I'm looking for without taking that extra step. I try not to iron on my quilt. I try to get the seam allowance open with my fingertips and just lightly running the tip of the iron across it and then steaming it. And I just rest the weight of the iron on it and apply steam, and that's it. I also do love my square ironing surface. I mean, this quilt, I'm not working as much in rows, but often when you're working on a quilt, you have square blocks or long rows, and I like having 90-degree corners on my ironing surface, so I much prefer a board like this to a clothing ironing board. That's just my style, but I do like it. Starting to look like a quilt, folks. I'm so pleased. So pleased. Oh, that's a bent pin, but you know what? It's still working. Did you guys see my little pin cushion? My sister made this for me. It's a little tiny teacup. It's about 2.5 or 2 3/4 inches tall. Super cute. Also has a lovely crack down the side of it because once I dropped it on concrete. But it's still ticking along. Put a little glue in there. Tammy, like your design wall. Estelle, love watching you sew and quilt. I answered Donna about the iron. Made by Misty. Wait, what? You're going to be in Richardson? Yes, I am. Check Stitchhouse's online calendar of events. It's November, I believe it's 14 and 15. I should have looked at my calendar before I came down here. But it's a Thursday and Friday. So as it stands now, the Friday is going to be my live and unscripted show. So much like my live show that I do on YouTube, and it will probably be aired on my channel too. There's a lot of logistics to that, but that's the plan. But in any event, for those of you who are there at the store, you'll just literally get to attend a live production. Makes me feel all fancy. It's like those game shows where you get to go and be in the audience. You can be like that. You can heckle me while I'm stitching. Part of that project, and then also the second day, is going to be kind of geared toward beginner long armors. So we're going to talk a lot about loading process, advancing the quilt, keeping it square, some about types of batting. So it's those sorts of topics. I am seriously thinking about, you're getting an inside look here, I am seriously pursuing the production of another online course. So the one that I have currently is free motion quilting, but it does not, it covers a lot of free motion quilting designs, but it does not cover the basics, like of what types of thread or needles to use or how to load your long arm. So that's what this is kind of gearing up toward. I'm presenting it at Stitchhouse to sort of see what the reception is and if this is what quilters are looking for. So you guys feel free to chime in on that in your comments here. And if you think of things after we get off air that you would like to see in a beginner's quilting project, whether or not you're a beginner, if you can even remember the questions you had as a beginner machine quilter. My idea is that some of it, the long arm is my happy place, right? So that's where a lot of it would be, but I also want to address just machine quilting at a domestic machine because so many of the areas are the same. And so it will be geared toward both. But if you have questions, fire them off to me. And the easiest way would be support@stitchedbysusan.com and just ask questions about it. Questions that come to your mind, things you'd like to see included in such a course. I would love to know that. And so far, I've just gone back into, Facebook posts and emails and all the things that I've heard from students and other quilters and just trying to address those questions. I keep catching these seam allowances. Okay. I'm going to do one more with the dark thread, and then we'll leave the last ones for later. With the light thread. Donna is asking, where could we get one about the iron? They're fairly common at quilt shops anymore. They're not inexpensive. It is an investment. Depends on how much pressing you do. Many quilt stores sell them. So ask for a Laura Star, and the Lift is what I have. They also have a large ironing board and a larger system. It's European in design, and that's where it's manufactured, and it's much more geared, I think, the ironing board, toward tailors and clothes makers and, couture clothes makers. And so it's the traditional ironing board shape with a bunch of bells and whistles and features. But I frankly love my iron on my own rectangular quilting surface. Janice is asking for an update on your Facebook page. It still doesn't seem available. As far as I know, it is, Janice. I was just in it about, half an hour before I came on air, and I'm not having any trouble with it over the last 4 or 5 days. It seems to be good. So if you guys missed it at all, last week my business Facebook page was taken over by someone or something. And it was a bit of a process. But it seems like everything is back in working order and we are back in control of it. That is the strangest feeling to have someone else posting things on your page, let me tell you. So here's a great question about the iron. This is Tommy. Wondering if you find steam can distort really small pieces. I'm doing 16 patches with 1-inch squares, and I've noticed the steam is messing me up. People really have different preferences about this. I've heard that from people who use steam too, that it certainly can. If you're trying to change the shape of your fabric, steam can be really helpful in doing that. I find that it works well for me as long as I'm not pulling in any way on the fabric. If I open that seam allowance with my fingers and then just set it with the steam, but don't iron it with the steam, I haven't had any trouble on this quilt. Now, these are not small pieces, but they all have bias edges. So there is that level of challenge. I do think it's a matter of preference. There are some people that are 100% team no steam, and then there are other people that are 100% steamers. I'm a steamer. But I won't say you have to. I'll just say that's the way I do it. one or two of you mentioned, Angie I think was one, and maybe someone else, that they're making this quilt as well. And if you are considering it or inspired to do it by my sewing on it tonight, Krista Moser, the pattern author, is hosting a sew-along, and it starts, I think, tomorrow, actually. So if you purchase the pattern, you automatically get an invitation to join that. It's free. It's just informational, and, you know, just a bunch of people are doing it at the same time. So that might be a fun thing. But by golly, I couldn't wait. I had to dive in. Possibly I would have been spared some undoing if I had waited, but that would not be like me. A lot of seam allowances crossing here. Oh, I curled that one up. Get back down there. Okay. There's our first part. Whoops, knocked some off. My fancy design wall. Isn't that cool? I'm so excited. I love it. I love it. Oops. Let's see what else. Laura's asking, has Stitchhouse moved into the new space yet? Laura, I don't know the answer. I know last week they were posting pictures of painting, and I know they hoped to be in there before I come. My impression is they're not quite in there yet, but it's really imminent, so that's all I know. Oh, thanks, Misty. It's the 14th and 15th. Yay! I'll be the one in the back saying, you skipped a stitch. Just teasing. Goat Quilter loves these later times. You know, I certainly appreciate that, you guys, and I hear you. My Friday Live and Unscripteds, though, because I do multiple cameras, I have to have my husband, Mr. Producer, here to work with me, and Friday morning is what works for him. So I just, in the foreseeable future, that's not going to change. I'm sorry. I would probably get more views if I did it at a different time of day, but I simply can't. Someone commented on last Friday evening's live session that they appreciated seeing me go so slow. They felt like so many quilters, at least on YouTube, go so rapidly. I don't know. I don't very often sew with other people alongside me, so I don't know what speed other people go at. I just know this works for me. I prefer to take the time to get my seam allowances to lay down and go in the direction they're supposed to and get them stitched down correctly. To me, it takes less time to do that than it does to undo if it gnarls up on you. So, it's not about speed. It's about enjoying the process. For me, anyways. Even though I do want this quilt to be done for Christmas. This coming Friday, by the way, this is Monday night as we're quilting. This coming Friday, I am planning on doing a live and unscripted episode, but I don't yet know what the quilt is. I don't think it's going to be this one. But who knows? Who knows? Do. Yep, that's right. Discuss next. Janice is saying, you responded to a post of mine in one of your groups, but I couldn't like or reply, and your page when I clicked was unavailable this afternoon. So one question would be, Janice, some of the posts that were made by this other individual when it was under their control, I did delete those posts. So if it happens to be one of those, even if I commented on it then, it will be unavailable. I'm not sure why you're saying the page, you know, why that's happening to you, that the page isn't available. But I would certainly start by exiting out of Facebook and back in, and possibly doing something as drastic as clearing the history on your browser. I know this has happened to me before too. My computer like gets stuck in a loop, and when it has seen something happen, that doesn't sort of clear out until I clear my browsing history. So that might be worth a try. If you don't know how to do that, ask a teenager. It's a worthwhile thing to learn. I do that fairly regularly actually on my computer. So, not that I should be giving any IT advice, let me tell you, but there it is for whatever it's worth. See what else we've got. Oh, Lisa, hello from Michigan. First time catching you live. Love your channel. Awesome. I'm so glad you joined in. Got a thick seam. Come on, pull it in there. There we go. Progress. Look at that. Aw, Donna, that's sweet. It's nice to see you making something for yourself for a change, even though I like seeing you work at your long arm. The truth is, Donna, I do make stuff for myself fairly regularly. I just don't always show it in any way. So, but thank you for that. That is very sweet. And I never want to lose my enjoyment of making quilts for myself. I never want my job to get in the way of my fun, if that makes sense, to spoil my fun. So far, no sign of it. It's still what I do when I've had a rough day or whatever. Head to one of my machines, make something pretty. My little stylus is quite helpful. A couple of these seams are thick, and just having the point of it to gently coax my fabric under the needle, where otherwise it might sort of squirt out in front of the presser foot and get distorted in that way. Just that little tiny point. My finger can't get in there and do it, but my little tiny stylus point can. And it really helps to keep things where you want them to be. The ultimate measure of my success is going to be how the point of this poinsettia lines up when it's all said and done. Whoops, that did not work well, but we know where we're going here. I love having this big table under my machine. I've always had my sewing machine, even if it was a little machine and didn't fit down into the table, I've always had a roomy sewing surface around it because I love to be able to spread out my thing like this, whatever the thing is, and make sure that all the pieces are laying together flat. But it definitely is nice to have a sewing machine that rests down in the table, and then all this area is so beautifully flat. There's that bent pin again. They're like a bad penny, right? They just keep turning up. Wilma's been busy. Hello from Richland. I've been super productive today. Cleaned the garage and freezer, quilted a little, and I even made and finished a backing. Awesome. It must be fall that kind of gets into us with these things that I'm the same way, and my mom was always like that too. There was always the fall cleaning and the spring cleaning. But last week I was up on a step stool getting all the pretty things down from above my kitchen cabinets. And you know how they get so gross with greasy dust in a kitchen. I'm just washing all the things, and I always unroll a long piece of paper towel on top of my cabinets to catch the bulk of that grease. And so scoop those up and laid it down fresh. Feels so good. This green goes to the top. See how easy it is to get confused? Ah, look at that, it's sticking. But we're going to put one more on. Well, it's very narrow there, that one seam allowance. Yeah, I think I'm going to undo that little bit and sew it. I just got a little too close to the edge. I just want that to be a bit more secure. I should take a second and talk through what I'm working on again in case someone has just tuned in. Let's see. I am working on Crimson Christmas by Krista Moser of The Quilted Life. It's this kind of contemporary take on a Christmas quilt, poinsettias, and I just fell in love with it. She just published the pattern and I totally fell in love with it. Had to dive in. Krista is running a like a sew along that starts actually tomorrow, November 5th. For anyone that wants to join in, and probably she has, I don't know, emails, extra tips, whatever the things are. So pattern purchases required. So that's probably helpful, but of course, me being me, I had to just dive right in and start sewing. And I kind of went scrappy with my reds, things that I had in my stash. And I'm not sorry. I love those scrappy reds. Even though I have had to fiddle a little bit with the color placement and I've had to do a little undoing and redoing, I'm okay with that. I love the scrappy look. I have a little more fiddling to do on the left-hand side there. If you look closely at what I've got on the design wall, I'm not happy with the center portion of that lighter poinsettia. I want the light and mid colors to kind of alternate, and they're not. They're ending up, some of them side by side. So I'm going to fiddle with that. When I'm off air and can think 100% about it, I'm going to fiddle with that and change it a bit till I get those at a pleasing look. All right, let's cut the thread, start in the middle, and I just overlapped my stitching by about 1 inch, so I didn't have to do any reversing. I always think that makes a little bit too big of a lump of thread. I use a fairly short stitch length to begin with, and so that combined with overlapping the stitching about 1 inch, I think is pretty secure. And there we have it. Much better. It lays flatter too. It's amazing what even a few threads of difference times both sides of the seam allowance will do. Where does it go? Right there? Yes. There it is, you guys. So I'm going to wait and do the whiter parts, even the ones that are falling down. It goes that way. I'm going to put on my lighter thread to do those. So I think I might stop at that for tonight, because this is the area that I want to fiddle with, right? So I don't want to sew all these until I get these right. I want these 6 to alternate, right? Because I think that looks more pleasing. I don't know how I messed that up, but I did. So not a panic, I'm gonna get it fixed or rearrange the pieces, like the big diamond pieces, whatever it takes to get those to kind of alternate. So let's see what the comments are. I'll pull my computer in a bit so I can stay in screen. Lisa, are you pressing the seams open? If so, will this change the way you choose the quilting design? Well, I did know before I started sewing it already, Lisa, that I'm going to quilt it edge to edge. I'm not going to quilt it custom. I still could quilt it custom, but then if I wanted to do any stitching in the ditch, I would have to just stitch a couple threads away from that seam allowance, like slightly to one side or the other. So if I wanted to outline each poinsettia, for example, I could either stitch just inside on the red or just outside on the charcoal, but I already know that I'm going to quilt it with an edge-to-edge design. I love straight lines, straight horizontal lines, so that's kind of my go-to, but I also have a digital design that has just it's straight lines, but it has a subtle, I don't even know how to describe it, but you get this subtle diamond shape too because there's a cork in those lines. I don't know how to describe that, but if that's the one I choose, I'll let you know. If I choose to just do horizontal lines, I'll probably do it in Alive and Unscripted so that you guys can see it because I don't very often show a straight line quilt. I don't know why, I guess because it's a bit like watching paint dry to just quilt the same thing over and over again, but it is really fun to see the quilting develop. The whole quilt just changes character so much. Okay. Barbara, it's beautiful. Laura, looks great. Thanks for letting us watch over your shoulder. I mean, you were literally watching over my shoulder tonight, right? So standing with my back to the camera. Anyway, I'll do one quick more rundown of some of the equipment I used and the pattern I'm working on for those of you that are interested and want to make one of these of your own. So, tongue twister, Crimson Christmas by Krista Moser, The Quilted Life. All of Krista's patterns are done with the 60-degree angles that you're seeing in this one. I love her patterns. They're so well written and they're always just stunning, the results. She has a great eye for color too. So I know Krista has pulled together a kit for this. I chose to use fabrics out of my stash and I just supplemented it a little bit. I love that scrappy look and I love that my quilt will not be like anyone else's. That's just my personal feeling. So there's that. If you choose to purchase the pattern, she's got a quilt along starting on November the 5th. You'll get information on that if and when you purchase the pattern. What else? I know that she has already issued some additions to the cutting chart with a little bit of changes, so kind of pay attention for that. If you purchase the digital pattern, she probably updated it and you won't even notice the difference. If you get a printed one, you might want to look for those corrections. And I was sewing at my BERNINA 770 and working at my Horn of America table, which raises and lowers, and I've got it right at the top, which means that I can stand and move around and sew. That's my preferred way to sew. And I was using my Laura Star iron / steamer. It's a wonder. You guys saw it in action. It presses so beautifully and I get such a flat result. I just love it. Anyway, that's it for tonight. Thanks for joining me. It's been really fun sewing along with you and chatting a little bit during your day too and seeing what you all are working on as well. So again, thanks for joining me and I'll catch up with you next time.